Thank you, Nora Afika. Afika, thank you so much. I hope everyone had their safe and nutritious lunch. Yeah, as our food security, the definition, that we have, the food have to be made safe and nutritious, and that is the purpose of what we would like to see. And even though in the past session and if today, yeah, we are focusing on production, but we will not forget the whole system in terms of food security. Yeah. So I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Harbir Gill. Yeah, Harbir Gill. Yeah. So is that right, Mr. Harbir?
Yep, you can actually, Annie, nice to meet you. You can call me H. Everybody
Ah,
does.
nice,
It's a lot
nice.
easier.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
So, H, thank you so much for joining us. I've read a lot of exciting work that you are doing. Yeah. A lot of training, and today you will indulge us again with another topic, which a lot of people are thinking about: what is healthy soil, what is composting, and you are the right person to bring us into the topic. And we hope to learn more from you. Yeah, and maybe to start, I would just pass the screen to you to
Yep.
introduce yourself and what you do. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead,
great.
Paige.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. First off, look, thank you very, very much for inviting me. I've watched last week's and the people today. I'm quite in. Uh, I don't even know what I've been called. I'm not an agriculturalist, so but I am a composter. So today I'm going to try and focus on talking about composting and really why it's important. Will has done a really, really good job previously. I'm a big, big fan of Follow Farm and what they do, and essentially what makes Follow Farm and drives Follow Farm and makes it, United Nations of microbes and funguses and bacterias is because of their compost. So I'm really glad Will went today. I can listen to Will talk all day. I think he's brilliant. I think what they do is brilliant. So I'm glad I'm kind of following him because I can hopefully answer some of those questions that he had earlier. So I'm going to share my. Whoop, I'm not sure how this is done. Can you see that? Um,
Screen is not up yet.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
I think I've done the wrong one. So stop sharing. Let's try this again. Um, okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm unfortunately have to do this in PDF because I run a Mac and for some reason on Teams it just doesn't seem to be gelling, but I don't want to present for too long. I'd rather take all the questions that you guys have, and after listening to Will, I think you might have more questions, which is good. So Ground Control is the company that I run, and okay, so I just want to check this is moving, Annie. I just want to make sure this is moving.
Yes, yes, it
Okay,
works
great. So
perfect.
Ground Control as a business has been around since 2017, and really what we say our mission is to help Malaysians enjoy the pleasures, the benefits of gardening. So I'd like to emphasize this. Since we've really started is that we've very much focused on urban centers and not necessarily asking people to become farmers. The difference between a gardener and a farmer is very simple. A farmer has an order to meet. A farmer needs to sell produce in order to make money, um, a livelihood. A gardener does it for pleasure, and I think it's really, really, really important, especially during these times, that more and more people get into the garden. Gardening means far more to us at Ground Control than just growing your own vegetables. We do focus on edible gardening as a business, but on a personal level, gardening for me is meditation. It is my mental well-being and also my physical well-being. I carry lots of bags of soil. I do quite a bit of digging and kneeling and various other things in the garden. So gardening for me is a vital part of um, the urban food chain, I think. So what we do is we provide resources, materials, training for people to be able to get into the garden easier and enjoy it. So it's easier for them. But actually what really, really drives our business and fuels our business is the compost and the soils that we produce. So since 2011, I've been producing compost at our facility in Port Dickson. I was trained in, I really learned everything there was about composting when I visited many trips to Adelaide in Australia, and I worked with some composters there. A lot like Follow Farm, we're doing about 5 cubic meters, which is about 3.5 ton, 3,500 kilos, 3.5 tons of materials per day. People call it waste, we call it feedstock. I don't like to use the word waste because it's not. So overall, we're producing about 1,000 cubic meters of compost and soil blends a year. Our products are pretty much exclusively for the urban market and predominantly the Klang Valley. Yeah, so, and we focus again on making soils and soil blends that help gardeners for potting, for your garden beds, etc., etc. What else do we do? We've also got we have a division that we set up edible gardens for people. And we only focus on edible gardens. We consult with schools, with community gardens, with town planners now on both, on how to compost and also on soil needs. We've started to work with a few landscapers now, which is very interesting. People are coming to us, landscapers, developers are coming to us and saying, I want to put good soil into my project from the start, which is very encouraging. I think the future for us as we grow, we are growing, is we are looking to move into supplying to agriculture. Unlike Follow Farms who produce compost for themselves, we produce compost for other people. But the principles and the things that we do is very, very similar. So on a personal note, I'm not a horticulturalist. I'm not an agronomist. I fell into this by accident. I started gardening personally about 16 years ago. It's very easy for me to remember because my daughter is 17 and it was around when she was 1 year old that I started. And the reason I started really is I started questioning more about, I wanted to try and grow my own food. I thought it would be very, very easy. It's like, come on, everyone does it, right? We can do it. So I was more curious about, number one, where our food was coming from. I always said, I was saying to my wife, oh, it doesn't taste the same. The tomatoes don't taste the same. The vegetables don't taste the same. So I was, what's for dinner? What's going into our dinner? What's this produce? And for 20 years, I've run a film TV production company. And I was doing a lot of projects where I had to go to Camerons. I had to go to various places and film. And I began to question about where our food and how our food was produced. I saw some quite shocking things on a production that we did for a French TV channel. And I was in Camerons for 10 days. And I got talking to a lot of the locals. And I discovered that farmers in the Camerons choose to only eat in certain restaurants in the Cameron Highlands. So this made me curious. Like, I mean, what are we eating? And like everybody else, when they first started, I wasn't the best gardener. I had no clue what I was doing. So 16 years ago, when I first went to try and grow my first veg, I of course went and chose my favorite vegetable, which happens to be carrots. It was a complete disaster, complete failure. I got the seeds. I think my sister sent me seeds, or I got seeds from a friend in Australia. I watched the video from the guy in Wisconsin telling me how to grow carrots, and I followed the instructions, and we had great carrot tops, and everything was going great, except for when I came to harvest and I had to try and eat these things. and it was absolutely revolting. That's not a picture of the carrots, but you know, it was. Let's just say it didn't turn out too well. And it's difficult to ask questions here, but the simple reason that I couldn't grow carrots in the lowlands of Klang Valley and PJ was that you can't actually grow carrots in this part of the world. You need a winter, you need seasons, you need a change in temperature in the soils. So hence my first lesson, you know, which was that we live in a really, really unique environment here in Malaysia. And yes, there's tropical region right the way around the equatorial belt, but we have a particularly unique environment. And that is because of the amount of rainfall that we have, but also the consistent amount of heat that we have. And that makes us unlike anywhere else to grow. And it has its pros and its cons. One of its pros happens to be it's very easy to make compost. One of the cons is I can't easily grow carrots. So my journey began by actually making mistakes. And I continued to make mistakes. I still went to the nurseries and bought soil and just continued. And I began to understand and read a lot more. And it's really when a few things happened. First is I began to understand how important a root system is for a plant. I began to understand that plants essentially only get their food and their water and their nutrients from the roots. It's not through photosynthesis of the leaves, that's breathing for them. It's from the roots, and what the roots sit in is what feeds plants. Yes, so we heard about hydroponics and aquaponics, and there's a place for all of that. But once I began to understand how important the roots were, I wanted to know more about how plants get food and understand that. And something else happened around the same time, and that is that I started visiting and going for treks in our forests a lot more. My wife and I would go to Kuala Kubu or Fraser's or wherever and go for treks. And you know, I'd always wonder, like, why is it I can't grow stuff at home? But look at it here. You know, nobody comes and fertilizes and looks after our rainforest. Why is it that we can't do this? And you know, I decided I'm going to start trying to mimic nature in everything that I do, whether it be my urban plot, my pot, everything. And long story short, I mean, the reason it's so difficult to grow in a link house in I think Taman Desa was the time where it was, because we don't live in a rainforest anymore. What we do is we cut these things, the rainforest down, and what we're left with is this, which is essentially laterite. This was a picture of a development out, and a friend was purchasing a house, and we were just wandering around. And this is what happens to the soil once you do cut all the vegetation and stuff away. It's still soil, but essentially it's laterite clay. So it doesn't take long once you cut this for it to reach this, right? Because of erosion, etc., etc. So I realized that if I can try and mimic the soil as it is here, I might have a bit more success. And that is what essentially drove me to mimic nature and start. That is a picture that I took walking around the rainforest. And Will kind of touched on this earlier as well, you know, like when you go to a forest, you never see soil. Look at that picture. You can't see any soil. You can see the leaves, you can see twigs, you can see everything else. And that is all working to help build the soil, the food for the plants to survive. So this was my first ever compost pile in the back of my house. And really, this is how my journey began. And once I didn't know what I was doing even with the composting, but once I started taking the material from the bottom of this pile and putting it into my garden and onto my plants, the way I was able to grow in an urban environment completely changed. I stopped buying soil from nurseries. I realized that black soil in a nursery is laterite mixed with charcoal dust to make it look black. I started understanding more. I started doing far more research into compost, and that's when I spent more time in Australia learning, etc. So that's how I began, purely by accident. I didn't set out to save the planet, but what I discovered along the way opened my eyes about sustainability. I would really stress this. I do not know anything that has taught me about the concepts of sustainability, a circular economy, etc., anything more than composting has, and gardening per se, right? So why do we need to compost? Why do I keep telling people that you need to compost? Okay, you don't need a farm like Will to compost. We need to mimic what Will is doing in his farm in any piece of land and ground that we have, whether it be ornamental or growing vegetables or anything. Okay, the importance of us getting compost into our soils is it's very, very vital for us. So Will didn't touch on this, but a few questions were asked earlier on, and I hope some of this answers it. In Malaysia, currently, we produce 38,000 tons of waste per day. In fact, this figure is from 2018, I think. It's from Solid Waste Corporation of Malaysia. I think this has probably gone up. Okay, 95% of our waste goes to landfill in Malaysia. Okay, I know that they're trying to change this, but generally 95% of our waste goes to landfill. 50% of that waste is compostable. There are other good things you can do with it. You can generate energy from it. You can use it for you can use the compostable waste for other things. I get it, but per day we are sending 20,000 tons of waste that can potentially be turned into a viable, useful material, right? And that still shocks me. I still get shocked because running a compost business, I still struggle to get feedstock. Yeah, so for all you younger students out there, these are the reasons we need to change things here. So yeah, so 50% of our food waste, typical municipal waste, anywhere in the world actually, but here in Malaysia, most of it is food scraps. But then there's other bits that we are very, very interested in, and in our process we look at yard trimmings. In this case means garden waste. So we take a lot of garden waste for our composting. We also take a percentage of food waste, not a huge percentage. And then there's woody materials and wood waste and stuff like that. So at our facility in Port Dickson, currently we are doing about 2,500 tons we save from landfill every single year. That's actually gone up in the last, or it's going to go up 4 times by the end of this year. So if you're calculating, and that's the good thing about compost, you can measure quite accurately what we're saving and what we're doing. So we currently save 1.46 million kilos of carbon equivalent from releasing into the atmosphere, which would have, if it had gone to the landfill and been released as methane, etc. So there is a slight methane let off when you produce compost, but it's not as extreme as if you go to landfill. Okay, so you've heard this right the way through these talks, whether it be urban hijau or follow farm. Look, it is all about the soil. Now, even if you're not growing vegetables or trying to become a farmer, right? Getting microorganisms, getting biodiversity into your soil helps change the effects of climate change. Okay, just by putting soil constantly into your compost constantly into your gardens, onto your, you are making a difference towards the effects of climate change. Extra compost means extra biodiversity in your soils. More worms. More worms mean more. They poo more. More worm poo more means more. You know, your plants are healthier. Even if if you put compost on your soil and do nothing, you'll even notice that the weeds get bigger, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. What I'm trying to say is that better quality soil everywhere. Okay, in every inch of the urban as well as the agricultural sector will start making a difference. All right. So for the last 10 years or so, since I've been doing teaching and talking about compost, we've become far more conscious in Malaysia and everywhere in the world about the environment. And we all, the fact that you guys are here today lets me know that there are people out there who are interested in and more aware and alert. I'm convinced that the greenest thing we can do today, in the Klang Valley especially, is to compost. And this is why. Yes, energy, making a change in our energy sources. The government needs to stop burning coal. We need to stop using gas-emitting vehicles, all of that. I get that. However, that's not easy to do at the moment, right? It's going to take time, but we can all compost. When these gentlemen come and pick up your rubbish every single, twice a week, they come in my neighborhood, they will open up the black bags that you put out for them, and they will take the plastic, and they will take the glass, and they will take the metal, and they will take whatever else they can to recycle, but they will not touch your food waste, right? So the food waste is almost guaranteed to end up in landfill. Nobody wants it. Or even your garden waste, for instance, right? It's just going straight. Every time you cut your grass and you put a black bag of grass in front of your house, that is going to end up in landfill, right? But the plastic bottles, all of that will get recycled. And we all feel happy that our bottles are being recycled and all. But actually they're not. And it's very difficult to measure what happens to that. But with food waste, with organic waste, it's very easy to measure. And if you stop putting it into your bin and you start utilizing it, compost at home, compost in a community, compost at schools, wherever, the difference we will make is enormous. I've been to apartment blocks, and I'm working with apartment blocks at the moment where there are, 1,000 units, right? If each of those units is producing an average of 1.5 kilos of organic waste that would go into a dustbin per day, you can start understanding how much you save from landfill and the difference that it makes, right? And it's a process that is very easy and if you do it right, very painless, even in an urban setting. I'm sure you have loads of questions about compost, so I'll get to it. I'll end this very quickly so we can get to the questions. All the materials you need to compost are right on our doorstep. I think we're the world champions in sweeping up leaves and putting them into black bags and leaving them on the side of the road. Every development you go to, every school you go to, everywhere we go, we're constantly sweeping up leaves, sweeping up things, putting them into bags and leaving them there. This is all really, really useful material that we use for composting, for instance. Okay, I'll just go very quickly about the basics of composting because I'm sure you guys will have questions about this. The type of compost that Will was talking about, the compost that we do in our facility is large-scale composting. Okay, so it's basically the aerobic decomposition of organic materials. So as a composter, my job, I have a very, very simple job. My job is I need to make sure that microbes are happy. Okay, I don't actually need to do any work myself. Now, it doesn't matter if you are composting the way we are, and our piles are 3 meters high, and et cetera, or if you're going to compost at home, the principles are exactly the same. You don't do the work, you let the microbes do the work. Okay, so in order to let the microbes do the work, microbes are living things. You need to feed them, you need to give them nutrients. Microbes are really tiny and they don't like to eat very big things. So don't try and give your microbes, a branch to eat. If you break that branch up, or if you have big leaves, if you break the leaves up, they're happier. Like all living things, microbes need water, moisture. We all need water to survive, and we all need oxygen. So always think that when you're composting, your sole job is to babysit millions of microbes. And if you look after those microbes, they will look after you. Okay, they will allow you to compost so that you create the right temperature, which means that you won't have smells, you won't have bad odors. If you are composting in an urban environment, I do not recommend, like Will said, putting in meat or dairy products or oily food, because you don't want to attract vermin. On our commercial composting plant, we don't use meat, any meat, any animal products at all, and there's a reason for that. I can answer questions about that later. But the simple thing with composting is you need the right kind of nutrients. Carbon and nitrogen is what we often talk about, and you'll hear most composters talking about that. And if you can get your compost systems right, you can make compost in quite a reasonable amount of time. And that's at the end of it, what you want to try and do, make it as quick as possible. When we talk about carbon and nitrogen, there's two types of material. So like I said, the carbon material is very simple. It's the more woody material. Cardboard is also a good source of carbon. Dried leaves, paper, etc. It's woody, it's dry. Those are the kinds of materials that you give away that are very rich in carbon. The materials that are very rich in nitrogen are your food scraps, fresh cut grass, the weeds in your garden. But then things like coffee, there's also very rich forms of nitrogen. So as Will said, you can look at all of this up on YouTube. I don't need to go through this with you. But yeah, so let's start looking at this, what we call waste, in a different way. And don't just start looking at food waste. Start looking at horticultural waste as well. Start looking at this in different ways. I'd like to play a little video. Reshmi is gonna help me do that. So if you can't watch the video for some reason, it gets jagged or anything, I think they're going to share the link in the chat group and you can watch it in your own time. So I'm going to stop my screen share here, and just as the thunder. Okay, and Reshmi, if you wouldn't mind playing the video.
Yes, we'll be playing shortly. Yeah.
If you're like most people, you're probably feeling a little hopeless about climate change and the damage we've done to our planet. Well, now there's a new way to look at climate change and how to deal with it that might just turn that hopelessness into hope. Climate change, as we know, is all about too much carbon in our atmosphere. But carbon is not our enemy. It's the building block of life. Everything alive is made of it, even us. The problem and the solution are simply a matter of balance. Let's step back and look at the 5 pools where carbon is stored on planet Earth. Starting about 500 million years ago, when plants first appeared on land, carbon began to cycle in an amazing balance between these pools, a balance that allowed for life as we know it to evolve. Then one life form, that would be us, figured out how to extract carbon from the fossil pool, which was pretty much a timeout zone for carbon. We've been burning it for energy, putting into play, and disrupting that balance. The way we manage land and do agriculture is moving even more carbon into the atmosphere. Specifically, we've moved 880 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is heating up the planet and destabilizing our climate. The oceans have absorbed a lot of this excess carbon, throwing off the ocean's balance, resulting in ocean acidification and accelerating a mass extinction of sea life. So in order to save life as we know it, of course we need to stop burning fossil carbon. The big question is, where do we put this excess carbon to get the cycle back in balance? The good news is that the answer is literally right under our feet. It's the soil. Plants, using sunlight and water, naturally perform photosynthesis. They pull carbon in from the air and turn it into carbohydrates, sugars. Then they pump some of these sugars down through the roots to feed microorganisms who use that carbon to build healthy soil. Voila, carbon moved. The plants pump it in, and the soil stores it. Nature's living technology is amazing. Scientists have recently discovered that applying a thin layer of compost can help regenerate healthy soil, setting up an ongoing feedback loop that brings more and more carbon into the soil each year. Together with other regenerative practices like not tilling the soil, planting trees and cover crops, and planned grazing, we can build and retain billions of tons of soil carbon. This is carbon farming. This is regenerative agriculture. Unlike more carbon in the atmosphere, more carbon in the ground is good for us. It makes healthy soil, which is nutrient-rich and full of life and holds way more water. This means more nutritious food and crops that are more resilient in the face of drought. That's good news for farmers, families, and everyone who eats. Remember this, the way we grow our food, fiber, and fuel either puts carbon up into our atmosphere or pulls it down into the ground. The regeneration of soil is the task of our generation. Our health, the health of our soils, and the health of our planet are one and the same.
So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if that was, whoops, sorry it's a bit staggered, but please do try and watch that video yourselves. I think the link has been shared. That I first saw that 10 years ago, and Netflix have since made this into like a full-length documentary. That little video, that little animation, they've since made it into a full-length documentary. And if you get a chance, please do go and take a look at it. But that's 10 years old now, that video, that little clip. I'm glad to say in Malaysia, I can certainly see that more and more people are aware and getting interested in gardening, number one, but also questioning how important, what are we doing with our waste? And also what we can utilize, the importance of good soil. So yeah, so I can't emphasize enough how green or composting can be for our environment. Yeah.
Okay.
Annie?
Yeah. Thank you.
Afraid I can't see the chat.
It's okay. So we have a question. So, Mr. Sun, do we need to cover the compost pile with a waterproof cover during wet season? Yeah, that is the first part. Okay, second part is, can we get cheap woody material, shredded leaves from local council? So there are two parts to his question.
Okay. Can we convince them to leave it on the ground? Sorry. Okay, I see that. Just get that. Yeah, you know, look, I tell you a great story that I used to have loads of arguments with my dad about whether we should sweep the leaves from underneath the mango tree, the durian tree that he has in his house in Port Dickson, whether we should leave the tree, let the leaves be where they are underneath the tree, or he should sweep them up and get rid of them. Now, if you go back to the rainforest, nobody sweeps up the leaves, right? That leaves break down to become your next layer of food for that plant, for that tree, right? So I understand that having leaves on the floor is not practical for certain places, and it doesn't make sense, and then it can be slippery, etc., etc. But I think it's the way. Instead of putting them into black bags, maybe we can start sweeping leaves under shrubs or under bushes or under things like that. I know that MPPJ started a project in one of their parks where they collected the leaves and they neatly put them in a nice round, equal round circles below the tree to mulch the tree. And I was talking to the person in PPJ, and she was saying every week they get complaints about people calling them and saying you didn't pick up the leaves. So I think it's an understanding about what leaves do in nature, and like all what we call waste, right? What it does, how useful is it, and where should it be?
The other part is the compost pile. Do we need to cover it with waterproof material, plastic or
It
canvas?
depends where you live. It depends where you live. We don't, because we are, so we don't cover our compost piles simply because the scale that we are composting on. We don't have the luxury of being able to cover 1 acre of land or half an acre of land, etc. If you're doing it at home, my compost pile at home is not covered. I think the most important thing is, though, that I mentioned two things: carbon and nitrogen. So imagine if your food waste is considered as nitrogen. Please don't leave your food waste on top of your pile and walk away. Always, always, always cover it with carbon, which would be dried leaves or wood chips or other materials, so that, number one, the flies don't come, there will be no odor, there will be no smell. The only time you will have an issue with home composting, really where you get too many bugs and stuff, is that if you don't put enough carbon into your compost and you leave the nitrogen, your food waste, exposed. If you cover it, you're not going to have any issues. So you don't necessarily need to cover it with tarpaulin, but as long as you have a good thick layer of carbon on top, it should be fine.
I just want to share what I have seen with how you work with municipal council with the leaves, because I have this one of our members in Srimas. He lives in Damansara Heights,
Yep.
and he actually asked DBKL, to leave all the leaves that they get to leave it at this mosque. He asked the mosque people also to provide space for him, to do composting. So whoever in his neighborhood actually can come and take compost from there.
Absolutely.
Leave all the bags of leaf there, and they work together. I think this is something that you share, or you can approach your municipal council.
You mentioned earlier, Annie, about the importance of municipal council, and it is, so I've been doing this for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And there are days I still go and I it's like when I talk about compost, it's like, it's like I'm talking about some completely mad, foreign, or alien concept. But then there are slowly more and more people who appreciate and understand that this is, that within the council, that we need to do something about it. Yeah.
Okay, and we have this question: how can we get our tree trunks or garden waste shredded without owning shredder?
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, there is. Please don't think that if you have a big enough garden, okay, one of the things you can do is just leave the bigger things in a corner and kind of forget about it, right? Eventually, it will start to break down. But I get it; it's not practical. So we can't compost everything ourselves, and there are some things we have to let go, right? But please try and get yeah, don't try and put too many big things into your compost pile at home. It'll slow the whole process down. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a shredder is something that you can consider, but if it's too big, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
because
and
it's
if
not
you
viable.
use it once in a while, so this is you don't use it often, then
Yes, and I the small shredders are not great. I have to say, they do. It takes a lot of they don't. There's a lot of wear and tear. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from Dharma. Okay, I have 2 compost pits at my home garden. How do we introduce bacteria to help speed up the decomposition process? Is this necessary?
I mean, yeah, you can. There's lots of You can make your own microbes. You can make your own effective microbes by using rice water and sugar and milk and various things. You can make your own. All these videos. Look, if you're getting a decent amount of food waste from your kitchen, and you're putting in a good indication is this: if you take 1 handful of food waste, please always put in 3 handfuls of carbon, 3 handfuls of dried leaves, 3 handfuls of wood chips, or 3 handfuls of cardboard or whatever, right? If you get that mixture going, and there's enough moisture in your compost pile, there's enough microbes in there, believe me. We're very lucky we live in Malaysia. We're very lucky that the conditions are suited, right? I grew up in the UK. I spent 23 years of my life in the UK. And in the middle of winter, there's not much microbial activity inside a compost pile because it's cold, it's difficult to get, you've got to turn the piles, etc., etc. Here we're really lucky. So one of the things some people do is sometimes pour some molasses or in water, a liquidy, sugary water into their compost. You could put a spoonful of yogurt to help the bacteria, but it's not necessary. Yeah.
Some of this material has already indigenous microbe in it, no? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's just nurture.
Here's one thing you could do: is take a big barrel, all the weeds from your garden. If you chop all the weeds, and instead of throwing them away, just cover them with water and leave it in a bucket for a month or 2. Leave it. Yes, it's going to get a bit stinky, but you will see this amazing frothy material on top of the bucket. It's microbes. So just take a cup of that and pour it on your compost, or you can pour that directly onto your plants. Dilute it first, but pour it directly onto your plants. Yeah.
Okay. I think this one goes back to kitchen waste, food waste. What you suggest, overcoming rats problem?
Okay. So look, I do not recommend in an urban setting that you compost meat, oily food, or too much dairy products. And the simple reason is that will attract vermin, that will attract your rats, you will attract the tree shrews, etc. In all the years that I have composted, I have never seen a snake in a compost pile. I get asked this all the time. Oh, I can't do composting because it will attract snakes. I have never seen a snake in a compost pile or a compost bin or whatever. In Malaysia, snakes are in the drain because they want to stay cool. They don't want to get hot. In Australia, in winter, a snake maybe wants to be in a compost pile because it's warm. But here, no, I've never seen it. But vermin, if you only use vegetable matter, I look, I compost right outside my kitchen at home, my house, and we have no issues with rats in our compost. So yeah, it's I understand why Will does what he does, and if I ran a farm, I wouldn't have any issues with composting meat. But for an urban setting, where you need to be a bit more aware of odors and your neighbors, etc. Try not to compost with meat. The other thing is that always try and make your compost pile or your bin as big as you possibly can. I see a lot of people trying to compost in small, the 50-liter black bins stuff. It's very difficult. It's a lot harder. I don't discourage you from doing it. If that's all you can use, please do it. The most important thing is you stop sending the waste to landfill. That's the number one priority, whatever and however you can. But if you can go bigger, go bigger. If you want to compost in a barrel, try and get a slightly bigger barrel. If you see what I'm saying, yeah.
Another question from Injewan. Okay, is burying cooking scraps in pots with soil, is this considered composting?
Yeah. Well, okay. It essentially it all breaks down. One of the things when I'm teaching people how to compost on a balcony, for instance, what I encourage people to do is to take a pot, a nice deep pot, a pot which is at least 1.5 feet, at least 60 centimeters, or not, yeah, at least 50 centimeters high, for instance, right? And the first thing I'll do is I'd put dry leaves at the bottom, okay, and then I would put my food waste scraps in from that day, and I would automatically cover it with old soil. So soil that I've cleaned out from other pots that I want to, I've used the soil to grow something and I don't want to throw the soil away, old soil. And then the next day I would repeat this process all the way until the pot is full, right? And then you put that aside. About 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, what you will notice is that everything inside that has compressed. Automatically by itself, it has sunk. So what I then do is I would take some good soil, put it on the top, and I would put a seedling into it. And over time, you're going to have a plant that's really, really happy because it's going to grow. But as the plant grows bigger, everything underneath it just is going to break down to become essentially become compost and soil. Yeah. So it's a perfectly legitimate way of doing it by burying it, but get creative with the way you bury, and don't bury so much food waste that it's gonna become smelly and stinky. Yeah.
I've noticed in the past recently a few companies are promoting this mini composter household machine.
Yeah.
So how effective is this? What kind of quality do we expect?
It's not compost. It's not like a 24-hour compost machine is not compost. And I'm happy to tell even the people that make it to that it's not compost. What you get is often a gooey, gunky material that comes out. And I've had a couple of instances where I've used some of this material and put it on plants, and I noticed that cats go for it. And the thing is that I think there's a value when in a machine like that. Please don't get me wrong. I just don't think what it produces is compost. I think if you took that material and you were to put it into an aerobic composting system, what you would do is you trap nutrients from that food waste, and you can then now, put it in. For instance, it's a great way. Like I said, you don't want to compost food meat waste, right? But if you were to put the meat waste into that machine, you can take the material that comes out and then put it into a normal, regular aerobic composting system, if that makes sense. Yeah. I've struggled with the materials that come out of those machines. I'm not sure if you've tried it, but I struggle with it.
Yeah, I have not tried. And, when I look at the material that come out from there, it is still quite rough and,
Very
so
oily.
solid. Yeah.
Oily.
Yeah.
So it serves a purpose, I understand, as a waste management system, but I don't think you can call it compost, and I certainly wouldn't be putting it on my plants. It takes 8 to 12 weeks to produce our compost, and there's no, unfortunately, yes, I can say, if I had, we are looking to invest and increase the size of our production, and there is certain machinery that we can bring in and we're looking at, and we can add some microbes and stuff. But most I would save 2 weeks in my process. And even then, there is one municipal council, and they will remain nameless. What they are, I have bought some of their compost, and what they actually do is they just break material down and they leave it in piles, and they don't let it break down properly, and they put it into bags and sell it. And the dead giveaway is that when you put your hand into this material, how hot it still is. And if it's so hot, when you put your hand into this material, then when you put it on your plants, it's actually an indicator is it's going to suck more nitrogen from the plants than it is going to give plants nutrients. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can't cheat with compost. You can use compost that's like maybe a half to 3/4 broken down. You can use it as mulch on top of your plants to help water retention and stuff like that. But you can't cheat nature, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, so if being a gardener and a consumer, sometimes I want to buy compost, ready-made compost. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do I know which quality or what should I look for? You mentioned premium compost. What do we expect when we say premium compost?
So we produce. I mean, we sell compost predominantly only to an urban market now. We do have a few clients who are farmers, and we are R&Ding with a couple of universities and also with some other people for agriculture and whatnot. But unfortunately, in a premium compost in an urban setting means is that I need to put it through different levels of screening, so that when people get it, it's very nice, light, soft, and fluffy, right? The compost that I use at home is not like that. I just go straight to my compost pile, take what's at the bottom, and use it, right? As long as I know that it has broken down, it's not going to, even if I have twigs and pieces of egg that hasn't broken down properly, eggshells and all, it's fine. I use it. But unfortunately, to cater to an urban audience, I think you need to, sometimes we get phone calls and say, oh, I found a twig in my compost. Is this okay? Yeah, it's absolutely fine, right? So the main thing is unfortunately, what you can't see in the compost. What you want to make sure is that the compost is full of microbes. It's when you put it into your ground, it's going to help the mycelium and other funguses and bacteria to grow very healthily and quickly. So that's the main job of compost. Compost is not fertilizer. Please, please, please stop thinking it's fertilizer. Compost is food. You don't eat vitamins. What we like to do in Malaysia is we like to take a bowl of rice, which is, like very clay soil, and every week we like to put a vitamin tablet into the rice, and you say you eat this, right? What compost is, and what we encourage at Ground Control is that give your plants a meal, a well-rounded meal that has got all the nutrients, everything that you want, and let it take when it wants it. Remember, our focus is not on teaching people how to become farmers and make an order, right? So a farmer needs to produce as much yield as possible. It's, I get all of this. I get all of these arguments. But one of the interesting things is, I'm not sure if you saw the talk with Urban Hijau last week, and we've worked with them, and we're doing, I'm really happy to have taken part in a test with them, which they are trying fertigation. Instead of using cocoa peat and chemicals, they're using compost soil and, compost teas and worm tea and various other things. And they've had huge success with that project. So we believe in feeding your plants a well-rounded meal, and occasionally giving it some vitamins, as opposed to constantly giving it vitamins and feeding it just rice. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think Scott, I think H just I think covered that, because he asked whether we can substitute fertilizer with compost, and we said compost and fertilizer.
We you know what, I think the people that I worked with in Adelaide, and when I first went there and I started seeing how much compost they produce, I mean, millions of cubic meters per year, millions, right? And I was asking them, who's using all of this? And it was very simple. There is not a farmer, whether you're an almond orchard or a wine grower or whatever, everybody is using compost. The difference is are they still using chemical fertilizers? Yes. But the big thing is that they have been able to reduce the amount of fertilizer that they require and relook at the types of fertilizer they require, right? So that's the point, is to keep your soils alive, right? We don't focus so much on agriculture, and this is why I tell DBK, or this is why I tell whatever developers that we're talking to, every time you build a house and you lay you put a garden in for somebody, make sure there's good soil there. Why are you giving people such bad soil as a developer and expecting them to be able to have healthy gardens? By giving them good soil, even if you want to just grow heliconias, right? Your heliconias are going to be happier if they have good soil, as opposed to, we always think about good soil and growing vegetables or agriculture. We also need to start thinking about good soil and just general gardening, right? Yeah.
Okay. We actually are running out of time, but we still have a lot of questions. So I don't know. Maybe we take extra a few minutes.
Yep,
minutes.
that's fine.
Yeah. I hope Secretariat is okay with this. Okay. One question I think very important for us to also know. Swilin asks, can we put in cardboard and paper into our compost bin? I think you.
Yeah, you can, but please be careful. Which is that when it first starts to break down, paper especially, it can go a bit gooey. So just don't put too much moisture. Don't overwater it when you're putting in too much paper. Yeah, and try and start using more natural things as well. I'm not a huge, if I lived in, like I said, if you live in Europe and there's no leaves on the trees in February, then yeah, you need to look for alternatives. But we have plenty of materials here on the ground that you can use instead of paper or cardboard. Yeah, but it works.
For what would be the recommended ratio of compost to soil if we were to mix them?
So if you're just digging up soil, look, you can go anywhere from 5% to 50%. It really depends on what you're trying to grow. And I think that we get asked this a lot, which is why do you have so many soil blends? Right? We have one blend called Mediterranean mix. We did one blend called balcony. We do a balcony blend. Why so many? Why is it so confusing? Well, the soil that you put, if you have a very deep pot, a pot that's 3 feet high, for instance, don't put the same soil in at the bottom that you have at the top. Think of the root system of a plant. If you went to a forest and you dug down 3 feet, right? Look at the different layers and types of soils that you would get from within that. And if you have a 3 feet deep pot, try and mimic that. So have more clay at the bottom because roots need something to hold on to. But then as you get higher, have more compost in your soil blend. Yeah.
Last question, okay?
Okay.
Sorry. I think our audience has been very participative, very active with us. So okay, one last one. Ms. SM Lai asked, have you looked at what sort of balance of microbes in your compost under the microscope?
Yeah.
And based on the soil food web, what do you see?
So the easiest way for us to do this is that when we will use our compost to make something called compost tea, and we go through various sifting processes, and then I'll go and see somebody who has a microscope, and we will look at this and try and see the amount of microbial activity. When we first started. When we first started ground control in 2000 officially, because I've been composting for many years and we were selling our compost through various other companies, but when we started ourselves in 2017 or just before, we sent all our soils to UPM, all the different blends we were doing, and we did quite a bit of work, extensive soil work, analysis and stuff. The only issue that we find here at the moment is the expense of it. So as long as my main concern when I'm composting is that I don't want to use materials so we're very picky about the materials that we get because we are putting stuff into bags and selling it. So we don't want to have things where we get heavy metals, where we where there's materials that there's potential of too much fungicide going into it, etc., etc. So we're more conscious about that. Very confident about the composting process that we do in terms of over these years. I'm not so concerned about the microbial activity. I would love to work with a scientist to get more information about microbial activity within our compost and stuff. And I know a lot of people are starting to do a lot more work on this. By the way, when we talk about microbes in compost as well, and the type of composting we do, we actually in our facility, we have 2 types of compost. One in which we are trying to produce more bacterial-rich compost, and then another one that we're trying to produce more fungi-rich compost. And then at a later process, we mix the 2. And yeah, so I could stay for another hour and talk about that. It is, but yeah, yes.
Okay, so we are unfortunately we are coming to an end. So before we end this session with you, maybe you could just give us 1 minute of your parting advice, our take-home message for us, the wisdom that you would like to impart to us. So,
as Will was saying earlier, we didn't, this is all about helping the earth. It is, right? And what I've discovered is that this silly little process of not putting things that we call waste in a dustbin, but utilizing it in some way for your garden, for your soils, the difference it makes is astonishing, right? You don't need to look after and worry about, and also the easiness of being able to go into a garden which is full of very nice rich soil. It's so easy to chunkle. It's so easy to dig up, as opposed to something that is clay, rock hard, etc. It's a joy to work in. So find a way to stop your waste going to the landfill. Find the way, whether it be through your universities, your schools, your community gardens, your own balcony, whatever it is. Find a way to do that and benefit from the material that you get at the end of the process. Because it's magic. Honestly, it's magic.
Thank you so much, H. Thank you. It's been very enriching day for us, to hear all of you speaking, I think more or less in the same, towards the same day. It's making, you are talking about making microorganism happy, bacteria happy. We'll talk about making the farmers happy. So happy microbe, happy farmers, happy consumers. Yeah, so this is something that we embrace, and with that, I really thank you for spending your time with us today. Yeah, I'm sure the rest you can see from the comment, how everyone is really appreciating your time and also your good work. Saving tons of waste, food waste that goes into landfill. I think this is something that we also have to appreciate. But also at the same time, it is also our responsibility to also reduce waste. Yeah. When we have to do compost, mean that we have not done our part to reduce the waste. So this is something that we all have to take, a responsibility for. Thank you, Harbir. Thank you so much. And for everyone, please thank and clap for Harbir. Thank you.
That's
okay,
fine.
before I end the session, I just would like to say thank you to the three speakers that we have today. We have Francis Chua in the morning, Will, and also now H, and that has brought together the issue of food security, how we look at this. But keep in mind, that even though the stress for this program has been on SDG2 on food security, think about how we transfer this knowledge to SDG 15, life on land, SDG 14, life on water, in water, underwater, and our climate action, SDG 13, and partnership is still very, very important. Today, a lot of stakeholder collaboration, partnership, this is important to look at food security. At the end of the day, when we look at food security, production is only one part. We also must make sure that the food that we produce, at the end of the day, whatever technology we use, it should be affordable. It must be affordable for people to eat. It must be also safe. It must be also accessible to everyone. With that, I thank you and all the audience who have been very, very active with us. Thank you so much for this. Thank you. So I give it